All right. So, the other day, I exposed to you an argument that was put forth by Princeton and Northwestern universities, a study that says that we are no longer the United States of America is no longer a republic, that we have now become an oligarchy. The headline, and this is in this is an article from Ben Swan, but you can find it all over the place. Princeton study declares U.S. government an oligarchy. A new study from Princeton and Northwestern universities has stated that the United States government more closely resembles an oligarchy or a corporatocracy than a republic or a democracy. Princeton and Northwestern. And yet, yesterday, our new Fed chairman was introduced and questioned in a hearing that was held, in which she was asked a couple of key questions. And one of the first was, and she dropped the bomb that deficits will rise to unsustainable levels. Well, pardon me, but they're already at unsustainable levels. Wait until you hear these numbers, folks. Fed Reserve Chairman Janet Yellen, referencing the Congressional Budget Office's long-term budget projections, told the Joint Economic Committee of Congress that under current policies, the federal government's deficit, quote, will rise to unsustainable levels. In the next 10-year budget projections it released in April, the CBO estimates the federal government will run an additional $7.618 trillion in deficits from 2015 through to 2024. By the way, everybody knows it's probably going to be double that number because they're always the Congressional Budget Office is always conservative in this stuff because they represent Congress and they don't want to look as inept as they are. And at the same time, the CBO projected that the federal government's debt held by the public would rise from $11.983 trillion, $12 trillion, to $21 trillion. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, these numbers are so staggering. And what kills me is, first of all, the Fed doesn't even exist constitutionally. It has no legitimate, legal, moral, ethical right to exist. How do I know that? Because our founders told us that we should never allow that to happen. And a private central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberty of the people than a standing army. We must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. Thomas Jefferson. He went on to say, but with the respect to future debt, would it not be wise and just for that nation to declare in the Constitution itself that they are forming, that neither the legislature nor the nation itself can validly contract more debt than they may pay within their own age or the term of 19 years. It is incumbent on every generation to pay its own debts as it goes, a principle which, if acted upon, would save one half the wars of the world. Let me just refresh your memory on the first sentence again. A private central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army, and we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. Hello? All right. Since we know what our founders thought of it, why have we allowed it to go on? Well, because we've allowed the Fed to have control of our economic future. And the Fed is a private cabal of bankers. And Congress treats these people like they're the king and the queen of Siam. When these people come in, in Congress, they can't bow and scrape low enough. You ever hear them talk to these people? I mean, the deference that they issue to them in speaking to them. Oh, thank you for coming to this hearing. We're so anxious to hear your opinion. Your opinion? Chairman Yellen says, when asked, are we still a capitalist democracy? Or have we gone over the cliff into an oligarchic form of society in which incredible economic and political power now rests with the billionaire class? That was Bernie Sanders, the Vermont socialist. And Yellen comes back and says she'd prefer not to give labels. In other words, it's already way too late for you guys, but you don't want me to say this publicly. The way these people bow and scrape when they talk to them is just unbelievable. I mean, the deference in their voice. What recommendations? This is Dan Coates, the Republican senator from Indiana. Here's what he says. What recommendations would you give us in terms of dealing with this uncertainty that is basically causing a lot of these businesses to underperform? The hell does Janet Yellen know about running a business? She's never run one. The question, guys, you have no idea how insane this is. I want you to read these two articles because the issue here is they're questioning her as if she has some inside crystal ball-esque ability to read the tea leaves of the future, and her Ouija board will give them some magical answer. Coates remarked that businesses in Indiana and the business people in Indiana constantly go up to him and they say they're underperforming because of uncertainty in the marketplace and because of federal taxation. They don't know what's going to happen. Regulatory policies, Obamacare, all these other issues, right? The same thing that we all know to be the cause. Superb regulation that is so massive, nobody knows what to do. You've got to hire compliance and regulatory policy officers in the corporation to make sure that you're following all the rules. I just did a segment on it. It's costing us what was it? 1 point some odd trillion dollars a year to comply with it all. What recommendations would you give us, oh Oracle, in terms of dealing with this uncertainty, oh Your Highness, that is basically causing a lot of these businesses to underperform? He asks her. Oh, great wizard. Nobody gets to see the great wizard, no how. So I agree with you, says Chairman Yellen. My own discussions with businesses, I hear exactly the same things that you are citing. Concerns with regulations, about taxation, about uncertainty, about fiscal policy. She just reiterated exactly what he said. She goes on to say, I guess one recommendation that I would give you is that long-term budget deficits we can see in, for example, CBO's very long-term projections that they remain. Well, that's not a recommendation. That's a statement. She goes on to say, there is more work to do to put fiscal policy on a sustainable course. We have heard that lie, there is more work to do, from every politician's mouth from time immemorial. And that's not a recommendation. That's a statement again. There is more work to do to put fiscal policy on a sustainable course. Well, no kidding. Gee, thanks. That's like sitting there and saying, yeah, your kid's going to get older as time goes on. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Then she goes on to say that progress has been made over the last several years in bringing down deficits in the short term, but that a combination of demographics, the structure of entitlement programs, and historic trends in healthcare costs, we can see that over the long term, deficits will rise to unsustainable levels relative to the economy. Okay, that's not a recommendation either. That's again stating the obvious. Thank you, Captain Obvious, for the third time in one paragraph. She goes on to say, and putting in place a package of reforms. Ones, I know these are very controversial matters, but ones that would probably help confidence. Okay, so thank you, Captain Obvious. We need reform. About what? Can we get more specific? You see, the joke here is that this is the same crap that Greenspan was telling us. It's all vaguish. That's what it is. It's a new language. It's called vaguish. Well, of course, we need to be able to pull back and I don't have any details I want to give you currently in the moment, but we're working on plans, and we've been planning this for quite some time, and these plans are very extensive, and they're very thorough. And Shut up. The only plan you have is you're planning the demise of the entire flippin' nation. And you and your cronies, Congress, the Fed, these corporations, the multinationals, the billionaires, the corporations, the people in government, the corporate governance groups, you've all set up yourselves in your own personal families. You know, it's like you've all built your own little arks, and the heck with the rest of the small peasantry. You know, we've got 1,000 arks for 1,000 Noahs, but everybody else be damned. Ones I know that are very controversial. Here's what Coates then said to her. I mean, talk about, Your Highness, I bow before your greatness. Listen to what he says. Coates then goes on to say to Yellen, you join a long list of very responsible Americans who have the experience and the expertise to give us some warnings about what may happen in the future and our inability to act over the last several years now in addressing these major problems that are going to have significant consequences on the economy of this country and on future generations. Did you just hear what I just heard? Oh, your magnificence. You, madame, join a long list of other very responsible Americans, all of whom, but you amongst them the highest, have experience and expertise to give us, the lowly, the foolish, some warnings about what may happen in the future. Please uncap and uncover your crystal ball, my lady. Oh, Oracle, tell us what may happen in our future. What will happen as a result of, quote, our inability to act over the last several years in addressing these major problems that are going to have such significant consequences on the economy of our country and future generations. Please, madame, oh, consult with the mighty gods and tell us, oh, what will become of us. He continues. I almost want to puke right now. I don't know what it is going to take for us to summon the will to do what we all know that we need to do. But I appreciate your adding your name to that long list, saying you have a responsibility up here, and you're not fulfilling that responsibility. She didn't say that. Thank you for the public flagellation and lashing, my lady. Thank you for looking into your crystal ball and exposing me in front of all of my colleagues, my good friends across the bar, and my good friends across the other aisle over here, because thank you for summoning the courage and having the will to do and tell us that which we all need to do, and we know we should do. I appreciate your adding your name, your mighty, magnificent Federal Reserve Queen name, to the long list of others who have said to us, you have a responsibility up here and you're not fulfilling it. Thank you for lashing me publicly, my lady. May I do anything else to earn your chagrin, your hatred, your disgust? Is there anything else I may do to generate your puke on my back? Think about the words this man used. Think about it. Tell me that what he did there if he came home that night and his wife didn't smack him with a frying pan as he came through the door and busted his nose for cowering and groveling, before what? The Ice Queen? Unbelievable.
To us in terms of dealing with this uncertainty that's...
I'm going to let you hear it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the way he talks to her.
Basically causing a lot of businesses to underperform.
So I agree with you. My own discussions with businesses, I hear exactly the same things that you're citing. Concern about regulations, about taxation, about uncertainty, about fiscal policy. I guess one recommendation that I would give you is that long-term budget deficits, we can see in, for example, CBO's very long-term projections that they remain. There is more work to do to put fiscal policy on a sustainable course, that progress has been made over the last several years in bringing down deficits in the short term, but that a combination of demographics, the structure of entitlement programs, and historic trends in healthcare costs, we can see that over the long term, deficits will rise to unsustainable levels relative to the economy, and putting in place a package of reforms. I know these are very controversial matters, but that would probably help confidence. As regulators ourselves in the aftermath of a financial crisis, we also can see very clearly, for example, that the kinds of regulations we're putting in place during the process of doing that create uncertainty and burdens. We hear this, for example, from community banks all the time. And, here I would say, to some extent, the regulations, we're doing this for a very good reason. We had a financial crisis. It's important to make the financial system safer and sounder. And for our own part, we will try to make sure that we worry about regulatory burden. We we try to design regulations that are different and appropriate for different sectors of the economy. I think it's important for us, too, to be sensitive to regulatory burden in order to minimize its impact on the economy. But we are doing things that are important to make the economy safer and sounder.
Well, thank you.
2.5 minutes, and she didn't say a dagnab thing. Talking about, and we're not done. I've got another minute to play for you. I got to tell you something. Sitting there trying to tell us that like this financial collapse came out of the blue completely. I mean, like a storm on Mars that just showed up at 200 miles an hour. Nobody could have predicted. She is the regulator. They're the cause of it. Boom and bust. And every time there's a boom and every time there's a bust, they strip a little bit more power, a little bit more resource, a little bit more money. Where do you think the American nation has gone in the last 100 years?
Thank you for that answer. And in closing here, because
yeah. So now let's hear Mr. Beggar, because
that are important to make the economy safer and sounder.
Well, thank you for that answer. And in closing here, because I've been noticed that my time is up, you join a long list of very responsible Americans who have the experience and the expertise to give us some warnings about what may happen in the future and the consequences of our inability to act over the last several years now in addressing these major problems that are going to have significant consequences on the economy of this country and on future generations. I don't know what it's going to take for us to summon the will to do what we all know that we need to do, but I appreciate your adding your name to that long list, saying you have a responsibility up here and you're not fulfilling that responsibility. Thank you.
I mean, you got to be kidding me. I'm going to shoot myself in the head, Queen of Mean, Queen of Ice. And I'm going to thank you for ordering me to commit suicide politically. Do you ever see Congress people talk to anyone else on a witness stand like that, with that level of deference, with that level of bootlicking? When he came home last night, his wife should have been standing there waiting at the door and gone, pow! The truth is, I'll tell you what, he doesn't kowtow to his wife like that. It's an embarrassment. They're an embarrassment. He's an embarrassment. She's an embarrassment. What did she say that qualified her for such deference? What? What was her oracleness? Anything? Anyone? Bueller? Can anybody find any one thing that she had to say that was so world-shaking, so enlightening, so insightful, so articulate? It was a mealy-mouthed spew of 2.5 minutes of diarrhea. She didn't say anything. Thanking her for being a loyal American. Loyal? Responsible? How is the Fed responsible? Their balance sheet is $5 trillion flipping bucks. And they printed it from nothing. If you can find responsibility anywhere in that picture, I'll pay the debt. The whole $5 trillion. You know why I don't ever have any fear of covering that bet? Because the Fed is anything but responsible. They are as regulators, she said. Did you hear what she said? As regulators. Well, if you're regulators, then how did you allow regulation to not meet the requirement to keep all these banks in control? Because you own them all. They're all you anyway. That's like China saying, we're not responsible for North Korea's actions. Of course you are. You are North Korea. North Korea, from the Chinese perspective, is just, that's like the little brother who carries all the dope for the big brother who runs out to the corner and sells the crack. He leaves it with his little brother so that if somebody gets popped, the kid won't go to jail for more than 6 months in a juvie home. But he doesn't want to do 40 years in a federal pen. China uses North Korea as an excuse to go out there and say, let's see what the United States says when we do this. And they send North Korea out to do their bidding. In North Korea, it's the same thing here. These banks are owned by the Federal Reserve. That's like the police department investigating who robbed the bank when it turns out it was every member of the police force. I can only say one thing right now. You're listening to America's Voice now. I am glad this segment's over because I got to go vomit. You've been listening to America's Voice now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm the host here. You can communicate with me directly. You can send me email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's Mike at americasvoicenow.org. Send me an email. Tell me what you think of this episode and this segment. Then do yourself and me and everyone around you a favor and send it off to anybody else who doesn't understand what the Federal Reserve is and educate them quick. We'll see you Monday. God bless you. Have a great weekend.